Some organizations complain we can't find leaders internally. Others quietly grow them internally, consistently across countries and cultures. I've always wanted to understand what those organizations do differently. This is what works in leadership development. Conversations with people who don't just talk about leadership, but actually build it from within. Today, I'm speaking to Jasmina Ek, Vice President of Human Resources at Ergot. Jasmina started in psychology, trained in cognitive behavioral therapy, then added an MBA in finance and banking to the mix, which means that she understands both human behavior and organizational needs. She leads HR across over 20 countries, focusing on engagement, culture, and leadership development. Yasmina, I'm really glad you're here. What brought you to human resources, and more importantly, what's kept you there?
When I started studying psychology, I've always wondered, where do I want to go? Every psychologist is initially interested in clinical, helping people in that way. But I figured at some point, I actually want to work with healthy adults. Actually, that became clear to me during my studies at this mission. This is where I see myself. And then organizational psychology was a particular passion. And where do organizational psychologists work? Most of the time in HR. I started with an internship in an organization that had more than 15 other organizational psychologists in the same room. And I felt this is the place I want to learn. So this is how it started. And then what kept me, I found great pleasure in working with people in organizations, trying to make their work experience a better one, helping managers and leaders hire the best people, then develop the best people. I find that's my way to contribute.
So you've seen leadership development from many angles: psychology, HR strategy, business performance. Why do you think so many leadership development efforts fail to produce actual leaders?
That's a very great question, Gosha. And I've seen many organizations invest a lot of money into this. It's almost something we have to do. We know that it sometimes doesn't yield the results we need, but it has to be done. We focus a lot on training. We rely on workshops, certain frameworks or surveys rather than practice-based learning that could potentially change real behaviors. We also lack, let's call it contextual relevance and personalization. I remember sitting in many workshops myself where the content was so generic that I couldn't find how does it relate to our organization, and not to me even less. It didn't fit into any of these two. And so how can I apply it in my day-to-day work? We also really don't validate training or these efforts. It's mostly completion, participation, satisfaction, but we don't measure or observe behavioral changes or impacts in actual work environments. So we don't really see what works or what doesn't work. And ultimately, I think from a perspective of a psychologist, we don't take into account the idea of the psychology of change. To change people's behaviors requires deeper mindset shifts, addressing certain beliefs about control, risk, your own identity, self-awareness, etc. So it all remains on the surface. And to some people, it inspires them, but it lacks that consistency with a bigger group. So we don't reach majority.
So this is what I'm seeing, that space training initiatives are getting shorter and shorter. Yet people expect behavioral change where there can't be any because this is not how we work. You mentioned two levels of potential pitfalls, but also potential ways to make that change happen. One is organizational and one is individual. Let's start with the organizational. How do you think organizations can create conditions that help people step into leadership rather than feel overwhelmed by it?
That's a very good question. I think we mentioned in the first question, maybe lack of individual relevance, of training or development. We can't really expect our interventions to be effective if the person doesn't find it relevant to them personally. Maybe that's because people don't even know their own strengths, their blind spots, their emotions, and how does that affect the core of effective leadership. We think we do, especially very experienced managers. Oh, I've been doing this for ages now. Of course, what are you talking about? My strengths. I know who I am. But they often lack a bit of self-awareness and that emotional intelligence. We can, as an organization, try to enable that in many different ways. Start with that. Make sure that those who are meant to be in leadership roles understand that first before we apply interventions into strengthening those strengths or changing some of the behaviors. We sometimes also, I mentioned that I think there's a bit of lack of growth mindset or maybe even a reflective practice in organizations. As much as we talk about this growth mindset and that feedback is an opportunity to grow, it is still a threat. Each of us, feedback is a threat to my identity, who I think I am, and how well I do. This is difficult to change. People will always feel a bit threatened, but maybe organizations can change it. We've been talking about 360 feedback, continuous feedback. I'm not sure how much this works in practice, and I don't think we figure out the right formula, but this is what the organization can develop, that framework that encourages this type of growth mindset, change mindset.
There is more to leadership development than programs. And you've worked with performance management, succession planning, internal mobility, as well as leadership programs. Which of those elements contribute the most to growing leaders from within?
I found when people have a chance to change roles within the organization, sometimes complementary roles, sometimes outside of their own comfort zone, it for most managers, and it's on the organization to assess if they have the capacity or the potential to do that, to make a change like that. It builds them up to that experience of doing something else, of managing a different team, being responsible for a different side of the process, which shapes people in a way that no training by itself can do. One of my previous organizations did that a lot, maybe overdid it. They would put people in situations that they weren't ready for. So actually they were doomed to fail almost. They didn't feel successful. They weren't successful sometimes, and that was bad. But when it was done well, now some of these colleagues are so much more mature and think about leadership responsibility in such a wider scale. They connect dots that others don't even see because they were in different perspectives. They had that different responsibility, and they take all of that into account when they make decisions. So that was the most transformative way of building people up. It's difficult to do because you want your people to be in one place. You want them to perform. You want them to deliver. You don't want them now to change, switch roles, and go and do that for somebody else. So it's a difficult thing to do in an organization. If the senior leadership, if they don't decide this is exactly what we want to do, and we are doing it, it doesn't really happen that much, but it is transformative. I've experienced that myself personally.
I'm hearing two things. One is you can't think yourself into a leader. You have to act yourself into a leader by
That's a very good point.
go at different things, hopefully enabled by the organization.
Yes.
I don't know if you are familiar with the concept of
Mhm.
an organization as a beach ball, and everybody,
Mhm.
the beach balls have different
Mhm.
colors, and everybody
Mhm.
sits on their own color. HR sits
Mhm.
on, I don't know,
Mhm.
green, finance sits on
Mhm.
blue, and all people see is the color they sit on.
Mhm.
But it's a whole beach ball, so they should be jumping for a little.
Yeah.
They should can get an experience of
Mhm.
different colors of the beach ball to be
Mhm.
able to really understand how the organization works. So,
Mhm.
any tips for how to enable that? Sounds exciting, but it's also messy.
If you, in its smallest form, organizations can do it, and this is what we do, by organizing cross-functional projects, real, tangible projects that are hard to do, and then allow people from different parts of the organization to apply, even if it's outside their scope of responsibility. Because then you, in a smaller scale, give them that exposure to something else, to something very different. And you can build part of that experience through a project, which is something that we try to implement in both our talent programs and in my own team within HR, where we organize strategic projects. We ask our team members to apply, and it can be completely outside of their scope of responsibility, but it may be it's like their passion or their interests, and to allow them to explore that in a very safe little box, a little safe universe, where you don't have to change your role fully. Although changing your role is the biggest catalyst for change, but this helps to develop that still.
There are so many different ways. I think of
Mm.
it. There's peer mentoring, and there's the Japanese model where they put people through a period of working in every department of the organization, so that people have a clear and comprehensive picture of the inner workings of the organization.
Yeah. One of the previous companies would do that for graduates. Graduates would go through different departments, but it wasn't as meaningful because, in a way, you have to have the base to build it on something. When you put a junior into all these different teams, they forget half of it because it's too much, it's too overwhelming. You have to almost pick it as Legos. You have to have something to put that Lego on if you want to build that competency or the experience. I haven't seen that it works really well for very junior people with no experience, but I have seen it work well with people who have already gained a base understanding of organizations, of their work, of how things work, and then that experience shapes them and builds them, and it works really well. But yes, there are many different ways to do it. Definitely.
So that's the organizational side.
Mhm.
If you, as a psychologist, were to share with us what needs to happen internally for someone to grow into a leader,
Mhm.
to believe that they can step up,
Mhm.
and what gets in the way of that growth most often?
This is probably the same that comes from the same place. It's, I think, ability to tolerate discomfort, to stretch yourself beyond where you're competent into ambiguity, the conflict, being vulnerable, which is necessary for the growth. To have that ability to tolerate discomfort or being lesser than what you're used to is, I think, a prerequisite for change. But it's not easy to do that for people. They don't want to feel like that. So they sometimes avoid those situations. We can maybe, as organizations or as leaders of those people, create those. We talk a lot about psychological safety and and those environments, and sometimes it's hard to do on a massive scale, but you can do it for your own team. So if people feel like it's okay and they can risk a bit themselves and their success, and that the way they're perceived as successful by exposing themselves to something new where they are life competent, then that will be more successful. But yeah, you have to tolerate it. You have to feel like you can fail and that it's going to be okay. So there are these two maybe key things. And we didn't mention the self-awareness that comes from feedback. As you said, I loved how you said ask for feedback. So that reflective practice. You reflect on yourself and then you ask for that reflection from others because you don't see it. You need a mirror sometimes. You can't just know everything. You have to have a mirror.
I've seen many capable people who, in many people's view, were leadership material, but somehow always teetering on the brink of stepping up. And I've seen those people in leadership development programs among their peers. And this community, because if a leadership program is built well, it does create a community of people, worked as a catalyst of that change and pushed people from this comfort zone into the unknown. Have you seen people getting more confident and stepping up when they felt the power of the community and they realized that they're not alone in feeling unsure and not quite ready yet?
I wouldn't know that. I never spoke to them. It's the psychology in me. I don't know why they did it, but I see that it happened. I don't know if it was the community or if it was due to their own personal attributes. I think it helps if there's a supportive infrastructure or great role models where we can see that it's safe and that it works, or where our culture values learning and experimentation. But ultimately, it has to be your choice. I've seen people in fantastic environments. I would say you have no excuse not to do this. And they still weren't able to do it. So I think your individual predisposition is as much as, at least as important as your environment, your support system.
As they say, you can take the horse to the water, but you can't make it drink.
Yes.
You've worked across many countries, many cultures. How do you maintain a shared leadership standard while respecting cultural differences? We are so different when it comes to how we think, how we act, how we manage people. How do you ensure there is a common standard, but cultural differences are respected as well?
I think it's a very difficult question. It's a very difficult thing to do. The differences are so vast and people use different language when describing desirable leadership qualities across different cultures. It doesn't make sense to try to impose the same concepts on everybody. It's the same high level concepts in a sense that you want team members to have full autonomy. What does that mean? In some cultures that work, some cultures that doesn't work. Some places it's desirable, some places it's not. I think that the only thing that we can try to embed is some core values. I want people to be kind to each other. I want managers to listen to their team members when they're trying to reflect on what happens. That's why I don't believe in leadership competency as a one framework that works globally. I don't believe in that. My team members are eager to create a leadership competency model. I'm just telling, just take something. If you want to have it, it doesn't matter. They're all the same. And because whoever builds them, you're supposed to build them by understanding your leadership qualities, your organizational needs, your priorities, your values. What does that mean? One value is in Croatia, the other value is in India, the third value is in Japan, the fourth value is in US. What common values? It's not a matter of our company. It's a matter of the location and the culture that people are surrounded with. So I don't believe in them. But I do think that there are certain expected behaviors that are more to do with how we treat each other. I know that sounds a bit naive, being kind to each other, but if you are trying to be kind, if you assume good intentions from people, if you trust your team members that they are doing the best they can, in every situation, then maybe that can create an environment where any leadership model can function because people feel good within their own leadership rules and frameworks in different countries. It's something I'm still exploring.
It's very difficult because I'll give you an example. I was running a session on intercultural communication and differences between Poland and the UK. That was for the UK team, working with their Polish counterparts. The common complaint that they had was that the Polish team was not proactive. They don't show initiative. And digging in, we discovered that it boils down to how people think about leaders in one country. A leader is one of the team with a little bit more status, a little bit more power. Whereas in some other cultures, the leader is like God, basically. Whatever the leader says goes. And people might be seen as not proactive, but what they do is actually wait for the leader to tell them what to do. This is the norm in the culture. And as long as we are in one culture, that's all good and fine, because everybody knows what the expectations are, both leaders and the teams. But across cultures, that leads to a lot of frustration and misunderstanding.
I have to say that I've seen that, especially this is valid when local country teams are sort of isolated from the group on both sides, because I can sometimes see individuals who have had enough exposure to others to understand that this is not expected, to understand that their expectation, it won't be understood. I have now one of the colleagues in India that used to work for a long time for a very large global organization. And I can see that colleague, it behaves and responds to requests in a way that I expect in our Western culture, because he learned how he's meant to respond to it and how he's meant to behave so that he's successful in the eyes of a manager who sits in Western side of the world. So I do think that people can learn. I've also had experiences with people who have done a lot of cross-country. They worked and lived in different countries, and that is deeply transformative. These are individuals, but then individuals can influence others as well.
Our teams are so diverse. It's quite important to set some ground rules for the organizational culture and get clear about expectations of what good looks like.
Yeah.
And I've always wondered, okay, how do we communicate it so that everybody is on the same page and understand what good looks like?
I've seen that transformation in a company I used to work for that had a very long local country history. I became part of a group, and it was left alone for a long period of time. The group level policies, group level expectations weren't imposed too much. It was touched here and there. Nothing changed in that company. And this is what to your point, nothing changed. It changed, it started changing, and people started adapting. The organization started not embracing, but understanding that it's needed, not embracing. In the beginning, nobody embraces change. But the change started happening when the groups in almost, I don't mean this to sound horrible, but it's almost imposed. Okay, this is how you did it before. This doesn't work anymore for you. It was a great practice before. We need to have one practice, and this is how the practice is going to look. Those little interventions, they changed the organization, and the organizations finally got closer to the group standard of behaviors and expectation. So I don't think there's a very easy way to do it. I don't think people will just sit down and say, let me change. Let me get this new behavior, new expectation on board. I think there is a bit of a push, as you said, that there has to be standard, and the standard needs to be sort of
Communicated and understood so that we are not left wondering, why is my way worse than your way? it's been working for us for such a long time. Why do we want to change it? Oh, we want to change it because we now work worldwide and we need, as an organization, to set the ground rules for how we act, how we lead, how we make a decision. Once things are more clear, people are less frustrated by the change that's happening. Let's talk about the future, because we are coming to the close of our chat. How do you think AI is going to change leadership development? How is it changing it right now in your organization?
Well, it felt like a good idea, and I haven't yet seen it fully work, but it's going in a direction that learning platforms or learning can be very personalized, very curated with AI engines that can detect skill gaps or combine them with maybe your interests, some other metrics that we feed it, and then tailor content to your needs, to your performance, to the outcomes that the organization or yourself expect to have. This is something that can happen also without this engine, but not at scale. And we try to do something like that without technology, tailor the leadership initiatives towards personal interests. And it happens, but it's very slow and it's not as effective probably than when you have something behind the scenes that curates it, the things you like and react to in a good way. I think feedback tools could change. I was exploring a tool that allows instant feedback constantly. After a meeting, I can send a little feedback note to one of my team members saying, "You've done such a wonderful job. I liked how you presented that element, but I didn't fully understand this other part of the presentation. Let's discuss further." It feeds into a feedback collection tool that then summarizes all those different moments to give you a more comprehensive, a more holistic view on where you do well and what you don't. If it uses insights into your emails or work tools, it can also show you certain blind spots that you are not even aware that you do or don't do. Like you give feedback to only this person. You completely ignore these other team members. You don't spend time with them. You spend twice as much time with this person as you do with others. For example, this is a bit scary, but it's already there. Copilot is there, and it's already digging into all of that. I'm just saying how it can be helpful to us as leaders.
AI is really good at, isn't it? Noticing patterns that we rarely notice ourselves. How often do I speak in meetings? Do I make statements or ask questions? This gives you amazing insights into your own behavior.
We're also looking at something that I reminded me of that. I could also forgot about it. We were looking into a tool that looks at the workflow. And then when it notices that the person makes mistakes in a workflow, in a part of their work process, reminder comes up to tell you, I don't know, when filling in this part of the form, the right way to do it is this. So it embeds the little learning moment, embeds itself into your daily work as a response to your, not a mistake, but your ideas, following something, yes, to your behaviors, different behaviors, and it's seamlessly integrated into your day. There's still a lot of work for us to prepare that tool to be able to do it. It's not that bright yet, but it does exist, and it sounds great.
It's exciting, isn't it? Because the whole value of training is actually application. How do you apply it consistently? AI allows you to. I'm equally excited because I'm creating the AI product for my own training as a way of extending the impact of my sessions.
I have one more, and it excites me very much. The element of simulation and experimentation. Even in therapy, you have role plays where you are basically trying to experiment or simulate conversations or situations, and it's with your therapist or it's with a partner in a learning environment, etc. But to have a virtual model, like a person that helps you simulate that, to deal with certain situations. How do I feel when I get that type of response? It seems I can go through a situation without actually going through a situation, but if I have to go into the situation,
You're ready.
yes, I
Like
went to
this,
the possible
and
scenario. I've seen what happens in the worst possible case scenario, and I'm ready for it. I can take it. I'm
yeah.
prepared. I know we talked a lot about the future, but there's so many exciting opportunities there.
What are the three main tips you would give people
Mm.
to help them create leaders from within?
Okay. These are my thoughts, and I have to say I haven't perfected them yet. These are tips for me as well, as much as for anybody else. One would be to focus on behavioral change rather than just content delivery. I want to track outcomes that matter, how we actually act, and how then teams experience behavior changes rather than just satisfaction with the delivered content. I think if we are able to build that environment in which people feel safe to experiment, to fail, and to ask and get that feedback without fear that is going to be very detrimental to their careers, then they will do it more. And in the end, I think it's something we're still missing. The third one, I would want to integrate leadership, growth expectations into it's every manager's responsibility. It's every manager's job, not only for himself to grow, but also for his team members. I know that sounds like something we already do. And as an idea, it's existed for a very long time. But I don't really see it that much in practice. Managers still often rely on HR or on the trainer or on the coach to take that burden off them. And they are not the ones who provide that feedback or who do self-reflection as self-initiative. If you can embed that into your culture or into performance conversations, promotions, reward systems, then good for you.
I love that. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation
Me too.
because it went deep into not just the systems that we can create to support leadership development, but also into the realities of how people's brains work.
Mm.
And I think the way to success is being aware that the both of those are equally important. We can't create systems that don't take into account
Mm.
the fact that we are humans and not robots.
Mm.
Although robots,
Yeah.
as we have established, are very cool creatures. That might actually help us with leadership development. So thank you so much,
Yeah.
Jasmina, for
Thank you.
today.
Anna.
And if one more thing, do you have a question for the next guest on the podcast? Is there anything that you would like to know from other people, other industries?
How do you get your leaders' undivided attention?
Mm.
I know it sounds silly, but we give them little pieces of learnings. We make it smaller and shorter because apparently people don't have time. And even if they do, they don't pay attention because we are so virtual and they can do several things in the same time. So how do you do that without actually having them in a room? I would like to understand. Can somebody tell me what's the best tactics for that?
Yeah, it's a topic for a whole other conversation. I would love to have a
I
conversation.
know.
But now we need to finish. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for your time, Jasmina, and for your insights. And for all of you, if you're trying to grow leaders from within in your organization, I'd love to hear what's working for you and what you're still figuring out. Thank you so much and goodbye.
Thank you. in the top 5.